WNST afternoon. That's all I'm going to say from the weird weather and long field goals and drives and running games and lack of defense. And it did not lack for drama, and it certainly had a pretty empty feeling all the way around on a Sunday afternoon where the Ravens win. They beat the one-time hated Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know if we got a whole lot of mojo for disliking them. There certainly were enough Eagles fans in our stadium. 27-26 victory. Luke Jones here to discuss all things Ravens as we head into Christmas week. And, look, I can find the good and the bad in this. I've been a little bit of a Debbie Downer on this thing, Luke, because I didn't like the way they went about their business on Sunday.
Well, I mean, I think clearly you're happy with a win. I mean, if they didn't win the game, then, well, we're talking. Well,
yeah, there are two alternatives, although we won't consider tie, right? So,
right.
Exactly.
But, this goes back to, and we're going to beat a dead horse because, what happened in the final 6 minutes of that game, starting with the decision to throw the football and Joe Flacco throwing a pick, and then the defense continuing its struggles on Sunday. I mean, for a number one ranked run defense to get gashed the way they were, that zone stretch scheme that the Ravens, once upon a time, not that terribly long ago, ran so effectively under Gary Kubiak, they had a lot of trouble against the Eagles with that. But overall, there was a lot to pick apart in this game, a lot to be concerned about, starting with leadership, game management, the defense, offense making mistakes. Overall, what was shaping up to be a decent performance offensively, but what happened late, and then after the pick, the next drive, they couldn't control the clock at all. I mean, there was a lot to really take away, and you said it. I mean, this team really, the way they played at the end, deserved to lose this football game. I mean, if not for C.J. Mosley, getting his hand up and failed two-point conversion, we'd be talking about a season being really on the brink of being over without some significant help. So you take the win, but much like we've talked about throughout the year, after most of their wins, there's a lot to take away that you can be concerned about and be negative about it if you choose to be. And 14 games into this thing, I think we all can agree this is very much a flawed football team, even if they are 8-6 and still very much in the playoff hunt.
Luke, we were sitting a foot apart when the whole thing started to sort of melt down, and they're in the red zone. They're moving the ball at will. I know that they were passing the ball primarily at that point, and let's be honest, they hadn't touched the ball a whole lot. I mean, it was one of those games where 11 and a half minutes of possession for the Eagles in the third quarter, but they're moving, from our right to our left. They're inside the red zone. They got a 10-point lead. They've got the best kicker in the business that guarantees that it's going to be a 13-point lead, worst case. At that point, the strategy employed by all of the greats from Lombardi to, anyone that would tell you football, if you just flew in and I gave you a game situation, like in a classroom setting, and I said, this is where you are in the game, what do you do here? Every football coach in the world would say, well, let's run. We might get in on the first play, and they get the ball back, but they're going to get it back down 17 points. Or let's just run the ball here, and if we take three, and maybe on third down we'll try to pass it and get cute and, get into the end zone or whatever. But if we got to settle for three here, at least let's take 2.5 minutes off the clock here and really back them up and just keep doing what we've been doing all day. And you would say, well, what's the only thing that could happen here, short of a field goal and 13 points and 2 touchdown drives, that could beat the team? You would say, well, if Flacco throws a pick six here, it almost came down that way. I don't really want to know how good of a tackler Joe Flacco is, but it looks like he's a fine tackler.
Well, you just said it. I mean, any smart, organized football coach with a feel for the game, you run the ball there.
Play the win the game, right?
It's funny because talking to you at the time and in the immediate aftermath, typically when they're in-game decisions, typically you think about it more and you can at least see where the coach is coming from or the player is coming from who makes a certain decision. But I have the exact opposite feeling on this. As I think more and more about this, I just think it was that much more of a horrendous decision. I mean, think about this. First of all, I'll throw a little math at you because we have win probability and all kinds of stuff. Baseball, we talk about this kind of stuff a lot. But
Luke is about to go nerd right now.
ESPN's win probability when the Ravens, after Mike Wallace gets the big gain there, 54 yards down to the Philadelphia 11, timeout, 6:21 to go. The Ravens' win probability at that point, 99.2%.
What? Really?
99.2%. And that really that puts a number on what you were just saying. This was a team up by 10 points. You have a 3-point, you have 3 points in the bag. Justin Tucker, barring a block, which we saw that happen in Foxborough, you would have the confidence that the Ravens clean that up and that they're going to have 3 points. That puts you up 13. You take more time off the clock, whether it's 2 minutes or you force Philadelphia to start taking their timeouts early. So either there's roughly 4 minutes left, and you could still possibly score a touchdown running the ball because you ran the ball really well on Sunday. It's not as though they were beating their heads against the brick wall all day trying to run the ball. And then on top of that, 13-point lead with some time left, under 6 minutes to go, maybe as little as 4 minutes to go. You're asking Carson Wentz, who didn't throw the ball, push the ball downfield whatsoever, except for a couple plays and the big completion to Ertz on the final drive. They had to run the ball and to dink and dunk it to move. So you're basically saying, we'll take the 3 points, we'll force them to score 2 touchdowns in the final 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes, or maybe a little bit more, and they're out of timeouts. And instead, after a timeout, mind you, keep in mind there was a timeout taken by the Ravens with 6:21 to go. It's bad enough that Marty Morningwood called that. I think it's very clear at this point. Let's call a spade a spade. He's shown no consistent ability to have a feel for what this offense is good at doing and sticking with it. We've talked about it all year long. Throwing too much, just whatever. It clearly hasn't worked. The spark that they hoped to get from firing Mark Trestman never occurred. If you want to hang your hat on the Miami game, knock yourself out. That's one game. So
now, all that being said, if they go and win on Sunday, everything has a happy ending at that point, right?
Well, but you still got to talk about process here. And this is where it goes beyond Marty Morningwig. John Harbaugh can say all he wants about it being an all-time worst play call and said he should have vetoed it. Well, why didn't he? He didn't veto it. And I'll put some of it on Joe Flacco as a ninth-year quarterback who's won a Super Bowl and has been in plenty of great games. Those three at the top, along with any other veteran players, any other offensive coaches, no one thought to say, guys, what are we doing here? We're up by 10 points with just over 6 minutes to go against a team that's had to run the ball all day to move consistently. Run the football.
Yeah, we don't need to show off here, right? Literally, right?
It's just an utter, and this is what I wrote at WNST.net, it is an absolute failure of offensive leadership, starting with John Harbaugh, continuing with Marty Morningwig and Joe Flacco, and anyone else you want to throw into the group. It's inexcusable. And you can talk all you want about the defense. You can talk all you want about Joe Flacco throwing a pick there, and, Flacco takes blame in that regard as well.
Well, I said to Flacco after the game, there's a lot of smart people around here,
Where were they?
What the hell were you guys thinking,
I mean,
and I posed it to him in that fashion. Like, what were you thinking?
I mean, this is akin to going out and playing in traffic. I mean, now they didn't get killed, but, they very well came close. They were a 2-point conversion away from being killed. I mean, it's terrible process, and just because the end result being a win worked out, it cannot forgive that from happening. That's the kind of decision that's made that costs people jobs. I mean, just plain and simple. I'm not trying to be...
No, we don't sit here and say that. I mean, you and I talk reasonably all the time, but if the Ravens lose that game on a 2-point conversion and now go to Pittsburgh 2 games down with the season over...
Barring a bunch of help from other teams.
I can't fathom. I mean, we talk about what Buck Showalter did around here, and that wasn't good, but I don't know that Harbaugh would have survived that. I mean, and that's something we're probably going to talk about for a long time because this was as sick a feeling of victory as I think I've had in that stadium. It almost felt dirty that they won because it was so ill-advised, right?
It was just downright reckless. And Harbaugh, he had the quote talking about, I'm all for being aggressive, but it was way too aggressive. He said it's the worst play call we've had, and it's my fault. Well, he's right. Again, Marty Morningwig called the play, so clearly that's a major problem with your offensive coordinator. But your head coach and your ninth-year quarterback, Joe Flacco's not a rookie. I mean, Steve Smith, anyone that has any idea, just being realistic and not just having bravado. Joe talks about it when he was asked about it. He's saying, well, I'm like, hey, Marty's giving me a chance to throw a third touchdown. That's not what it's about. It's about getting a win. I mean, it was, you said it. It was kind of sickening, and it was. And I know people are listening and say, man, these guys are being so negative.
Oh,
Again,
no. Come on now. I've been at this 25
process.
years. I pick the team to win every week. I think they can still win in Pittsburgh this week. But, man, they got a lot of splaining to do for that. I mean, that was just poor. And I think Harbaugh knows it was poor, too.
Yeah, and it's just, and hey, we've talked about some of these situations earlier in the year, going for it, 4th and goal from the 1, the Giants game. Many of those decisions that most people will judge based on whether it works or not, I've defended John Harbaugh on some of those cases.
They've thrown the ball on 4th and 1. They have, right? And it's worked. And so, and you could say, well, it's just a play call. This wasn't a play call. This was a lifestyle decision,
it's the philosophy
literally.
There, right. It's showing an utter lack of regard, lack of understanding of where you stood in the football game. At that point in time, the Ravens had a 10-point lead, and they knew they had another 3 all but guaranteed in their pocket. So at that point, against a team like Philadelphia, the way that they had to move the ball throughout the game with the run, with short passes, they weren't having Wentz throw the ball down the field whatsoever. Time was the much bigger factor there.
Take away the clock.
And again, no one's saying that you take a knee, run the ball, and, on the previous drive, remember, Kenneth Dixon had scored a touchdown. It's just, again, it's one of those things that's just, it's unforgivable. And they're very, very lucky. And I'll say lucky. They're very lucky to win that football game because that was the kind of decision-making that losing football teams make, and head coaches and offense coordinators and quarterbacks that don't know what they're doing. That's the kind of decision made there. And, it's just completely inexcusable. And, look, yeah, the defense needs to play better after that, but they should have never been put in that position as the point. In the same way that, Joe Flacco can't throw an interception there, shouldn't have been put in that position, and that's on Morningwig, that's on Harbaugh, and that's on Flacco as much as we talk about leadership, the being more fiery, being more vocal, and that stuff's eyewash. Joe's an even-keeled guy. It's been very successful for him. They won a Super Bowl with him acting that way, but that was a case where, as a 9-year veteran quarterback who's the highest-paid player on the team and has been through it all, you'd like to see him. If your head coach and offensive coordinator have lost their minds in that spot, you'd like your quarterback to say, what are we doing here, guys? Come on. Let's think about this a little bit. And it's not smart. And they're really, really lucky that it didn't cost them the game and their season right there.
He is Luke Jones. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Baltimore Luke, as well as Luke at WNST.net. All right, so, we've beaten up Flacco, we've beaten up Harbaugh, and that's all. And we got all week to do this heading into Christmas. Merry Christmas, by the way. The defensive stands that didn't stand, and we'll credit C.J. Mosley, and we're going to see him later this week as well around here swabbing for the bone marrow registry. The defense allowed a rookie quarterback in their crib at the end of the game to put together 11 and 10 play drives in the last 3 minutes of the game to, cut their throat open at the end of the game at home. There was just a lot not to like about this game. I know they won, and we're all going to Pittsburgh, and I know I'm just an old crab apple bitching about this, but there was a lot to not like about this game, and everybody that listens here, this is not the first time you've listened. It's not the first time you've been to the rodeo. I'm not the reactionary, but I'm not digging what I'm seeing right now, really.
No, and I think, again, this goes back to what we talked about after the New England game and reacting to that. I think it's because you saw how this team played against Miami. And look, whether the Dolphins woke up on the wrong side, they had a pretty impressive win against the bad Jets team.
Yeah, all they keep doing is winning since we beat their butts, right?
Right. I mean, whether they woke up on the wrong side of the bed or whether that's the absolute best that the Ravens can play and they just blew the door off of them, the Ravens deserve credit. They played really well in that game. But since then, and we talked about that game being the springboard, so to speak, that game being that performance that gave you hope that they could first, maybe go into New England and take the Patriots to the brink.
Well, most teams that win championships somewhere along the line look good.
Yeah, you were hoping. In fact, Dennis Pitta was even asked after that Dolphins game if that felt at all to him like that Giants game did, Week 16 of the 2012 season. Remember, that was their second game after making the change at offense coordinator. And Pitta, and look, no one knows at the time. I mean, clearly it remains to be seen, but Pitta said, I hope it is. But what we've seen since then, a very uninspiring performance in New England. And look, the Ravens won, and the Philadelphia Eagles earlier in the season were playing some decent football. But when you know that you're facing a trip to Heinz Field against Pittsburgh, where I know the Ravens have had a lot of success against the Steelers. That's why you don't look at the next Sunday's game and say, oh, they don't have a chance. No one's saying that. But you have that, followed by a trip to Cincinnati against the Bengals team that they haven't beaten in that stadium since 2011, and knowing that looks like A.J. Green will be back because he practiced this week and worked out before the game, and knowing that the Bengals would love nothing more than to ruin the Ravens' season if it comes down to that. You wanted to see a more crisp, more focused performance in terms of what happened with the decision making that we've beaten to death, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about to some degree because it was that bad, and also with your defense. I mean, the running game has just they have completely shut down opponents' running games all year. I mean, the kind of one game that you point to from an inferior offense, an underwhelming offense, was that Jets game. And keep in mind, no Terrell Suggs, no C.J. Mosley. I mean, that was at a time when we know the Ravens weren't playing good football. The other games that they'd given up some yardage on the ground were to the Dallases and the New Englands, where that they have a more balanced attack. But this was a case where they knew that Carson Wentz was not going to be able to just pick them apart, throwing the ball down the field. I just don't understand how you get gashed the way they did on the ground. And again, they did a nice job with their zone stretch scheme, but that was alarming to see, especially knowing the way that Le'Veon Bell's put up some big performances here of late. Certainly that game in Buffalo 2 weeks ago. So it didn't have a good feel to it, and
it doesn't make you want to recommend them next week.
Yeah, exactly.
If this is what the last thing your eyes have seen, and there's no Jimmy Smith, and you're getting Roethlisberger healthy, Bell healthy, Brown there, you have no Jimmy Smith. There's a lot of things this week that if they lose, you would say, well, I'm not shocked if they lose in Pittsburgh. And, I don't want them to lose. Do I think they can win? Sure, but I will not be shocked because this is 14 weeks into this. There haven't been a lot of really strong looks here where we can get together on a Sunday night or a Monday morning after the game and say, well, they're on the way. It felt that way 2 weeks ago after Miami. Doesn't feel so good right now. Yeah,
and a lot of this, again, we're talking about one performance specifically, this Eagles game that we're breaking down the minutia of.
And really the last 6 minutes of it, because they did win the game. They won the battle, right?
Sure. Defensively, you don't like how they played against the run. That was just. But I'm even willing to I'm willing, because they've put together the body of work that they have as a run defense, being number one in the league, entering Week 15. I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But beyond just recent history where they have had good game plans against Pittsburgh, and they've even won in Pittsburgh, which, keep in mind, Michael Vick started that game, what was that, Week 4 last year when they won there. They won a playoff game there 2 years ago. But this is a team that hasn't played well on the road I mean, their 2 road wins are against Cleveland and Jacksonville, and those were both games they had to pull out in the fourth quarter. So,
and one of them has a coach.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just you would have liked to have seen them build on what they did against Miami. And look, losing in New England, there's no shame in that. I think it just a lot of it has to do with the fact that it was 20. They were losing by 20 points, and it wasn't. The 2 special teams gaffes by the Patriots. One that was completely self-inflicted. The other, okay, Ravens, they stripped the kick returner. Okay, I'll give them some credit for that one. But clearly wasn't as competitive, wasn't as impressive as a 1-score loss.
Yeah, much like the Eagles getting back in the game on Sunday.
Exactly, right. Totally. Yeah. So between that and then just, this was a game where, and we're talking about style points here. We're talking about eyeball tests here, but that's what we have to go on. You can't just say, well, a win is a win, and then say nothing else as far as what it means for going to Pittsburgh. It wasn't crisp.
How you play matters, right?
Yeah. I mean,
sure.
For as much as they talked throughout the week about not looking ahead, about being focused on Philadelphia and not thinking about Pittsburgh, I think you can make a very strong argument that wasn't necessarily the case on Sunday, based on what we saw as far as being controlled at the line of scrimmage by the Philadelphia offensive line and some of the decision making, and just the fact that they were a 2-point conversion away from losing to a team that has been pretty woeful since a 4-2 start. So it's just again, you hate to be too negative about it because they did win, and it's week to week in the league. And as I mentioned, the Eagles at one point in time were looking like a team that had a chance in the NFC East, but it just wasn't crisp and was very uninspiring, knowing that they have to go on the road now, playing their 2 biggest division rivals, and knowing that they have very, very little margin for error at this point. Just not one of those performances that makes you feel really good about having to go to Pittsburgh on Christmas Day, that's for sure.
Merry Christmas, says Luke Jones. Bah humbug.
I know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He's Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. I'm Nasty at WNST.net. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our WNSTV YouTube channel. And anything you miss around here, you can find in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world that you are. Breaking news. That's going to happen first on the WNST text service. You get it sent directly to your mobile device. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford at Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday to drive you home on the SSV on WNST, and we hope everyone's having a great, safe, eggnoggy, Yuletide, caffeinated, at least in my case. Christmas week, we're going to have some fun. We're at Buffalo Wild Wings for the last time in Owings Mills this week for Monday Night Football and our best seat in the house, as well as our blazing wing eating competition. Also going to have CJ Mosley out. We're going to be at Adams Jeep next Tuesday night with Mike Wallace of the Baltimore Ravens, and hopefully a happy, good news final on Christmas afternoon. Weird week, man. We got football all day Saturday. We're going to have the Ravens in the afternoon on Sunday. It's Christmas week. We're enjoying the Yuletide cheer. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.